We'll start by taking a quick look at the assets. So I'm going to start with a little ice cream van that I've been messing about with. As you can see, it's made up of a few layers there. To speed things along, I'm going to use my building environments tutorial to build the landscape. In summary, what I have is the ground plane, a control point right at the center of the screen, a road, low poly road, and in this case, a new edition of the van base, I'm calling it. Now this will be important later to add our van to, so you'll notice the back end is slightly wider than the front end. Looking in the top view, although the van is facing in the wrong direction, what I have done is I've lined up roughly where the tyres are. So these will be the front two, these will be the back two. The only other thing to note is they're all sharing the same texture, set to world coordinates. So let's send that little lot into layout. They're all loaded up. Bit of housekeeping first. Select all the elements from the van, Control Shift, and we're going to group those under one single null. Create group. Let's call it van. Okay, that. So I'm going to turn the layers off, and then I'm going to turn them off from the renderer. I'm going to use native spline control here. You could use DB&W's spline toolkit if you had it, which is far more flexible and would also mean you don't have to chuck a ton of bones at the displacements. But anyway, let's create a quick spline. Okay, let's have one back here. Quick clone. Something just like that. And this should work as well. I think this is a 2020 edition. So let's select those nodes and select this spline last and press E. Ah, excellent. And they've all been grouped to that last selected null. Let's get some bones on the road. Actually, it's another chance to show off a 2020 feature. So if we go to options, it may be off by default. Under the items tab, always highlight viewport selection. I'm going to tick those two on. So anything I've highlighted here should automatically get highlighted here in the scene editor. So bones, road selected, plus on the keyboard, and I want a bone. Now I know this is tiny and I want it back here. I know this plane is 200 meters deep. So let's start at minus 100 meters. Shift R, as I said, is 200 meters. So 200 in there. I'm going to control space and search for split bone. It's just off screen here, but it's the flavor under the additional tab. Gives me this little dialog here. Each of these squares is a meter long, so I want this split up into 100 pieces. Okay. So that gives me 100 bones. I'm going to press R to rest them. I'm going to press M to bring up the motion options, and under spline control, let's type in spline, select the spline. There it is, all nicely splined. Now because this is already selected, I can just turn them off like that. That's all good, but let's click this top bone and let's zero it out so the position on the Z is at 0. So that's it for the bones. Let's collapse that. Remember from the environment tutorial, the displacement is saved with the surface. So if we take a look here, the value is plugged into the displacement. And the reference object, looks like a bug there, should be pointing to the control of the same object. So remembering that, we'll go to the ground object, P for properties, and we just need the surface displacement to turn on. Let's give that 1 meter distance. Now we need to do the same for the road. Let's turn on surface displacement. We want it slightly above the ground, so let's just put in a slightly higher value. So that is now above the ground, and we want to do exactly the same for this van base. So surface displacement 1.1, and let's have that just a little bit above the road. There it is here. As you can see, this van base is right in the middle. We don't want it there. We want it to follow the spline. So press M for motion options. And similar to the road bones, we will go to spline control. I hate all these bones. Anyway, spline, type that in. And you'll see it jumps to this position here. But actually, I'm going to select in that and put in 0. Okay, so it's at the beginning of our spline. Let's increase the timeline, something like 250. What's that, 10 seconds? We'll go to the end. And then on the modified, on the Z, we can just move that up there. As you saw me dragging the Z axis there, you'll see our van base nicely deforming with the terrain. That's good. It means we're almost there with this. Final step, making sure my van base is selected. Press P for properties and we'll jump over to the instancer panel. Let's add the instance generator and double click on that. Add object, we want to add the van, but we want to add the van that everything is parented to, which is this null here. To see all the child items of that van null, we will click this little button here. Now let's go over to type and we want polygons. And there we can see the van has jumped to that. Let's turn the headlight on. So the van is firstly pointing in the wrong direction and is not rotating with the terrain. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the rotation tab. Alignment, we're going to select edge alignment. And because it's pointing in the wrong direction, I am just going to rotate it into the right direction. So now if we play the timeline through, we will see that our van is very neatly aligned to the terrain. So I can now go in and change a few of these spline positions and everything will drag to the contours of the terrain, which is very nice. And also remember, we can pop into the surface editor and change our terrain around to whatever we want, all nice and procedurally. Any secondary animation you want to do to the van, you'll have to do directly on the van itself rather than the instance. So you may have to fiddle around with layouts just to get the two framed correctly. But other than that, I hope this has been of use.